Good afternoon. This is Dan Hilliard, North American editor for Kallanish, and the presentation today is What Goes Up. We're going to take a look at the U.S. current record sheet highs and what is going to come next. So it goes without saying that we're in uncharted territory right now. There was a huge amount of buzz in the market when hot rolled first hit 1,200 per short ton, which was its previous record high. And that record has just been smashed again and again. US hot rolled now sits at the 1,400 mark for some buyers in some regions. Exactly why it's so high is really a matter of some debate. There's raw material pricing, scrap and iron ore. There's consolidation, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Thin inventories, very impressive mill resolve, a almost complete lack of import pressure, and sheer luck are really all playing their roles to get sheet up there and to keep it there. What's certain is that the market cannot indefinitely sustain pricing at more than twice its historical average. In a healthy market, you would expect to see hot rolled somewhere around 600 to 700 a short ton, and we're now very comfortably double that. Sooner or later, someone is going to get squeezed, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more later. But just as a spoiler, it's probably going to be end users. So here's just a chart outlining the growth from the beginning of the year. You can see that it's a nice linear curve, which is nice to see. It's not exponential like you would see with some kind of black swan event, but still a little concerning that we started off the year already too high, and now we're into absolutely silly levels, really. So unlike the titular character, there is going to be a drop. We are waiting for a very real Godot that is very much coming. Market sources have pretty much been looking out for a drop since the pricing surge began at the end of last year. Its failure to materialize, or indeed to even continue rising, is somewhat baffling in the light of increased capacity builds. If you'll remember the steel tsunami that was supposed to come in the 2020-2022 timeframe, that really never went away. COVID just sort of slapped the Band-Aid over the long-term problem. And that was helped out a little bit by consolidation in the market. Obviously, Cleveland-Cliffs is now the largest flat rolled producer in North America. US Steel bought up Big River. So there's been a consolidation centered around raw materials and flat rolled production that is helping out with the capacity situation, but you still have the big SDI Sinton mill going in Texas. You still have a lot of piecemeal projects here and there. The best guesses that I'm getting from the buyers out in the market center around a summer time frame for prices to start to ease. However, that's being somewhat mitigated by problems with auto, and we're going to touch on that very last thing. Basically, your average run-of-the-mill car, not even an electric car now, is very heavily dependent upon semiconductors and electronic parts. If you don't have those little chips, you cannot build your car. So auto builds are being extended throughout the year. They're canceling a lot of the traditional breaks that you would see over the 4th of July, Memorial Day. That has the effect, just like it did last year, of producing sort of a catch-up effect. The auto companies don't want to get too far behind. They cancel the planned vacations, and they stretch out that hot rolled demand throughout the year. So we saw prices rise on the back of a series of black swan events, the 2020 election, COVID-19, all very historic history book type events. It's my thesis that the upcoming fall will be a lot less dramatic and a lot more banal, boring, actually. Margins are suffering at nearly all levels below the mill. End users are paying a price they won't be able to pass along forever, and distribution, while it's able to pass some along, is still experiencing a little bit of margin squeeze. You might have heard about a very large infrastructure bill in the US. That is a thing. That's a reality now. That will produce a lot of steel demand. However, it is a government bill. It's a government contract. So there's going to be a competitive bidding process. And almost always those government bills have built in provisions for exactly events like this. If steel is too high, you're allowed to go out and source it from outside of the country. Quite simply, new bridges and toll booths won't be able to be built with $1,400 hot rolled. So that price is either going to get shifted down or it's going to get shifted out of the country. And that brings me to my last and probably most salient point for this audience, which is imports. Where are they? We have a massive buildup in hot roll prices in the U.S. You would think that importers would be beating down the door to take advantage of it. I'm hearing basically that imports have not been a factor up to this point for several reasons. Most importantly, probably the Biden administration's non-committal stance on 232. So I'm going to shift to this next slide. And I just want you to take a moment and read this statement. This is from the new U.S. Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo. And basically, you can see in Raimondo's statement the playbook for how the Biden administration wants to deal with China. It's a aggressive stance. It's a competitive stance. And importantly for us, it is not entirely centered around steel. The Trump administration was very upfront about this being a steel versus steel contest, even though there was obviously a lot more going on behind the scenes with intellectual property, all that kind of stuff. The Biden administration is being a little bit more transparent and saying, well, it's not just steel and global overcapacity, it's intellectual property, it's EV supply chain, it's battery materials, it's really the whole shebang. And so I don't know that you'll see the exact same kind of tit for tat response that you got from the Trump administration regarding steel and the 232. I think you'll see a lot more comprehensive deals, a lot more linked together things, so to speak. And you'll see a more multilateral approach. We've already sort of seen it in the electric vehicle space, developing critical material supply chains, developing competitive regional markets. And there's no real reason to think that that won't carry over into steel. So where does this all end up? Basically, imports face quite a bit of hurdles to getting into the US. They'll come, but it will take a little bit of wrangling to get through the red tape. And it's going to take a little bit more clarity from the Biden administration before we really see imports return to the US in their kind of historic numbers. In the meantime, market factors, the margin compression, variable raw material prices, those will all chip away at the outstanding premium that you're seeing now. And so there won't necessarily be a rush to get a hold of the market share, but you'll definitely see more than you do now. And with that, I will pass it back along and I'll be available for question and answers in just a little bit. Thank you. Stay safe and sane out there, and I will see you soon.